Have you ever heard someone say that sleeping with your dog is good for you? Julia believed that too, until she realized her body was falling apart, night after night, for no apparent reason. First, it was just a silly tiredness. Then came the aches, the dizziness, and the fear. But what she didn't know, what no one imagined, was that the danger was inside her own home. Invisible, silent. And what if I told you? Her dog tried to warn her before it was too late. This story isn't just about the love between a human and an animal. It's about the signs we ignore, about how God sometimes uses the unlikely to save lives, and about what happens when you finally stop and listen to what the silence is trying to say. First, everything seemed normal. Every night, Julia let Thor jump on the bed. He'd curl up by her legs, with his warm body and calm breathing. It was comforting. In the early days, she even found it funny how that dog seemed to understand her routine. Julia had just moved in. After years of sharing apartments with roommates, she was finally living alone. The place was small, but full of light, with wooden floors and big windows. It was the kind of space she had dreamed about for a long time. But as soon as she dropped the last moving box on the floor, the silence hit differently. There was no one talking in the hallway, no sound of pots clanging in the neighboring kitchen. Just her. Just the sound of distant traffic. That first night, lying in bed, she realized that being alone also meant feeling alone. The next morning, with her coffee still cooling in the mug, she made a decision. She wanted a dog. At the shelter, they all barked and jumped like they were competing for attention. But not him. A German shepherd, sitting in the back of the kennel, just watched. Calm. Steady. When their eyes met, Julia felt something strange, but good. She knelt down, reached out her hand. He slowly walked up, sniffed her fingers, and rested his head in her palm. I'm taking this one. She didn't think twice. Thor adapted quickly. Within days, he knew where to lie down, when she'd get home, even when it was bedtime. That first night, he stayed in the corner of the room, just like she'd set up for him. But by the third night, he appeared by her bed. And on the fifth, he climbed up while she was already asleep. She thought about moving him, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. It was like he knew she needed it. First, it was just a bit of sluggishness. Julia would wake up slower, her body feeling heavy, her head a little foggy. She blamed the new mattress or the late nights binge-watching shows. It didn't seem urgent, just a minor annoyance she preferred to ignore. But the tiredness was always there, persistent, every single day. Over time, it wasn't just tiredness anymore, it was exhaustion. She'd go to bed early, sleep in, and still feel like she hadn't rested. Her body didn't respond the same way. Sometimes, it took her minutes just to get out of bed. And Thor, he wasn't acting the same either. He used to jump up excitedly when she got home. Now he'd just stay lying down. He'd get up slowly, like he was tired too. On walks, he moved more slowly, slept all day. She even joked, "You're getting lazy just like me." Huh? But deep down, something didn't feel right. And even then, she didn't suspect anything. She thought it was just a phase. Maybe she was working too much, maybe her body just needed a break. Thor could just be adjusting to the new place. But something about it didn't seem normal. She just didn't know yet how dangerous it was becoming. The first clear sign came on a random night. Julia woke up to a slight tug on the blanket. Half asleep, she turned and saw Thor. He was standing, holding the blanket in his mouth, trying to pull her out of bed. His eyes were more alert than usual. She groaned, tried to push him away, but he insisted. He let out a short bark, then a low whimper. He looked nervous. That wasn't like him. Still groggy, Julia tried to push him back to the floor, but he stayed right there, persistent, until suddenly he stopped, laid down with a heavy sigh and stayed still. That's when she realized he wasn't acting normal either. During the day, he was sleeping more than usual. It wasn't just tiredness. It was like he was shutting down, and so was she. Sometimes she'd forget simple things. Other times, she'd feel tightness in her chest for no reason. She woke up with headaches, dizziness, like she'd been drinking the night before, even though she hadn't had a drop of wine. And still, she kept thinking it was just stress, just tiredness, just a phase. That week, Thor coughed a few times at night, quietly, barely noticeable. Julia heard it but thought it was just the dry air, or allergies, or anything else that wasn't serious. But more and more, that anything else was getting hard to ignore. It was Sarah who noticed first. Julia's best friend since college, the type who doesn't sugarcoat things when something's wrong. They met at their usual neighborhood cafe. But this time Sarah stopped at the door. She stared at Julia for a few seconds, brow furrowed. "You look awful," she said straight up. Julia tried to laugh. "Well, good morning to you too." But Sarah didn't smile. She walked over slowly, sat down in front of her, still watching, like she was trying to put pieces together. "You've lost weight. You've got bags under your eyes like crazy. Are you even eating?" Julia tried to dodge the topic. Said she hadn't been sleeping well, that it was just the new routine, maybe an extended PMS. But Sarah wasn't buying it. "This isn't normal tiredness. Something's off." That's when Julia mentioned, almost by accident, that Thor had also been acting strange. Sarah paused. Her face grew serious. "You and your dog are both worn out." At the same time, the question hung in the air. Julia didn't answer right away. Until that moment, she hadn't connected the two. She thought it was just coincidence. But now, it didn't seem so simple anymore. Even after her friend's warning, Julia hesitated to book a doctor's appointment. She didn't want to go just to hear it was stress. Still, at Sarah's insistence, she ended up taking Thor to the vet. And for the first time, the word toxicity came up. Low, but present. And it wasn't normal. The vet was calm but direct. Thor was showing signs of mild poisoning. Nothing severe, but unusual. Slower breathing, low energy, lethargic behavior. Julia froze when she heard it. "Do you have any idea what could have caused this?" she asked. The vet shook his head. "Could be something in his environment." That's when it started to click. She was sick too. The symptoms were almost identical. Extreme fatigue, headaches, weakness, trouble concentrating. The difference was that she'd been brushing it off for weeks. But now, with Thor showing the same signs, the fear really set in. That same day, she booked a doctor's appointment. The physician ran blood tests, listened to her symptoms, and evaluated everything carefully. "You're showing signs of mild toxin exposure and oxygen deprivation." Julia froze. It wasn't stress. It wasn't psychological. It was real. "Do you live near a factory? Use any strong chemicals regularly?" She shook her head. "None of that. It could be something in your apartment." That sentence echoed in her mind all night. She went back home looking at everything differently. The air felt heavier, the silence more suffocating. And then she remembered. Thor had been sniffing around the heater vent a lot lately. Sometimes he'd just sit there, staring, like he knew something she didn't. That night, before going to bed, she heard it again. A faint hissing sound coming from the ventilation system. For the first time, she was scared to fall asleep in her own home. She didn't want to wait any longer. The next day, she called a home inspector. She explained everything over the phone. Her symptoms, the dogs, the doctor's warning, the strange noise. He didn't take long. He arrived that same afternoon with a toolkit and a digital detector in hand. They started in the kitchen. Nothing. Stove clean, gas lines intact. Then the laundry area. Still nothing. Julia started thinking maybe she was overreacting, until he got to the bedroom. He knelt down near the heater vent and placed the device there. 2 seconds later, the alarm went off. The detector let out a sharp, piercing beep. On the screen, the carbon monoxide levels were well above normal. Not enough to kill, but enough to make someone sick. Prolonged exposure for weeks. The inspector's face grew serious. "This thing's been poisoning you slowly, and you didn't even notice." Her heart raced. "What if I hadn't called? You and your dog might not be here anymore." He immediately asked her to open all the windows, called a heating technician. The leak was coming from a crack in the heat exchanger, something no one had noticed during the last inspection. It was small, but enough to make anyone sick. While the technician fixed the system, the inspector installed a brand new carbon monoxide detector on the bedroom wall. If this thing ever goes off again, you run. No second guessing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch with Thor lying beside her, his breathing calm again, his eyes peaceful. He was getting back to normal, and so was she. But what weighed on her now wasn't fear. It was the chill of realizing what could have happened if she hadn't paid attention to the signs. Or rather, if she hadn't listened to Thor. She remembered every time he tried to wake her up. Every bark in the middle of the night. Every tug on the blanket. He knew. Even without understanding what it was, even without being able to speak, he tried to warn her, tried to protect her. The entire time, she leaned down, ran her hand through his fur, and felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she whispered. He wasn't just a dog. He was the reason she was alive. And deep down, she believed it wasn't a coincidence. There was something bigger at play. Faith, maybe. God's quiet and precise care, delivered through the loyalty of a dog. One of those things you only truly understand after it happens. Thor let out a soft sigh and rested his head on her lap. She cried silently, for the first time in weeks, but not out of fear, out of gratitude. In the days that followed, everything started to feel lighter. The aches disappeared. Sleep returned. Her head felt clearer. Even breakfast tasted like something real again. Thor was back to running around the house, following Julia everywhere like before. It was as if the apartment had been freed from a dark cloud. And Julia, she felt alive again. But she knew one thing for sure: this story couldn't stay just hers. She knew she had been lucky. She couldn't stop thinking about it. How many people ignore the signs until it's too late? How many don't have a Thor to warn them? So, she opened her laptop and started writing. She told everything, from the beginning, from the constant tiredness to the moment the detector went off. She posted it on social media with a photo of Thor lying on the couch. The caption was simple: "This dog saved my life, and maybe this story will save yours." The response was immediate. Friends started sharing it. People she didn't even know sent her messages. Some said they'd never even heard of carbon monoxide. Others rushed to buy detectors. One woman commented, "This reminded me that my cat's been acting weird too. I'm going to check things at home." In just a few hours, the post had hundreds of likes and dozens of similar stories. And that's when Julia had another idea. She went back to the shelter where she met Thor. She brought a box filled with carbon monoxide detectors and handed it to the staff. "I want every adoption to come with one of these. And I want you to explain why." The shelter worker looked surprised, then smiled. "No one's ever done this before." "That's probably because no one's ever almost died in their sleep because of a heater," Julia replied, trying to smile back. She walked out of the shelter feeling lighter, and with the certainty that, even after the scare, there was still a way to turn that story into something good. That night, as she lay in bed, Julia looked at the new CO detector on the wall. The little green light blinked slowly, signaling that everything was safe. Thor jumped on the bed and curled up near her feet, just like he always did. Now, that small gesture meant something else. It wasn't just a cute habit anymore. It was a daily reminder that love, sometimes, saves us in silence. She smiled, ran her hand over his ears, and whispered, "You can stay there. You earned that spot." Life went back to normal, but it wasn't the same. Julia started paying more attention to the little things. The air she breathed, the way her body reacted, the signs she used to ignore. It was like life had pulled a veil from her eyes, and now she could see everything more clearly. And even though she wasn't religious, there was something about it that she couldn't quite explain. As if God had used that dog as a warning. As if she had been protected, without even knowing she needed protection. She almost lost everything. But in the end, she gained something else: perspective. Today, she still lives alone. But she doesn't feel alone. Thor is still by her side, as attentive as ever. And every time she sees him staring at a wall or sniffing the air, she pays attention. Because now she knows, sometimes danger makes no sound. But love always finds a way to speak. Now tell me, how many times have you ignored that discomfort in your body? That constant tiredness, that strange behavior from your pet? What if it's not just stress? What if it's a warning? Julia's story isn't just hers. Could be yours. Could be someone you love. Sometimes, God uses the smallest things. A quiet dog, a barely audible hiss, a nagging little ache, to get our attention. The question is, are you listening? Drop a comment if this story made you see things differently. And if you don't have a carbon monoxide detector at home yet, well, you know what to do, right? Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and stay with us for more real stories like this one. Because here we talk about life as it is, with faith, with love, and with eyes wide open.